This week on Three Questions with Corey Kareem.
Biggest problem that I see is podcasters are struggling on how to make money. Regardless of the size of your show, you can make money. So once again, it's not who knows you, but who knows what you know.
Never turn back. Only go clockwise. Never go back.
Now, before we get started with this beautiful conversation, please help a brother out and click on that follow button on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Enjoy the conversation.
Welcome back, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Three Questions with Corey Kareem, the podcast where we sit down with some amazing people who are doing some amazing things. And that's right. You guessed it. We ask them 3 questions, sometimes 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You guys know how this works already. To my listeners and my followers, come on, you guys know. But rather than just talk about my guests, their wins or their successes, we tend to start the conversation around their failures, more specifically, the lessons that they learn from those individual experiences. So with that being said, my guest today is a master connector who believes life is about time and relationships. You never know where a conversation today will take you in the future. With a career spanning advertising sales, podcast ad management, and leading partnership strategies for top podcast platforms, my guest has become a sought-after consultant, helping startups build communities and guiding podcasters to become powerful brands. He's got insights, y'all, specifically on how to build relationships, podcasting, and creating business success through meaningful connections. So, without further ado, Greg Wasserman, welcome to the podcast, brother.
Corey, pleasure. Everyone, a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me here.
Awesome, Greg. Thank you for being on the platform as well. Did I miss anything in that intro? Anything else you want to kind of add in there, kind of let people know who you are and what you do and what you're about?
I mean, the motto, you nailed it. Like, that's why we connected. I'll take any conversation because you have no clue where those go. So that's where your 3 questions become the fun part. It's like, you have no clue where I'm going to take this. You just have your questions and we'll kind of see where we riff from there. And anyone that's listening is just going to hopefully have an experience of learning and connection on, like, I feel it's either the me too, like, yeah, I can relate to that. Like, no one knows where that is. And that's kind of how I live.
Absolutely. I actually have a similar motto phrase. My motto is 60% of luck is just being in the right environment. That's something I personally believe in. Because I've seen it pay off for myself. Just showing up in the right environment. Obviously, you need a level of skill, a level of preparation, but just getting in the right environment where there's movers and shakers, people that are doing what you want to do or close to what you want to do, I think is a great way to improve your luck. So I'm with it. So Greg, let's get right into this. I like to come out the gate swinging a little bit, as they say. So as I alluded to in the intro, we like to start the conversation around, setbacks, difficult times, moments, mistakes, however you want to phrase that. So with that in mind, tell me about a moment in time where you had to face your biggest challenge, mistake, or setback. What happened? How did you overcome it? And most importantly, what did you learn from it?
Yeah, I guess what comes to mind in this instance is probably where the learning thing and where my life has probably changed from this one instance. So my background, as you kind of talked about, and anyone listening, like, was in media sales. I was at Yahoo, was a manager there for 5.5 years. I was unhappy, and so I started planning I never did the gap year, right? I'm an American. I know anyone that's listening, like, we don't do gap years here. It's basically your standard: go to school, go to college, get a job, get married, get kids, go to the house, like the whole 9 yards in that regard. So that's what I grew up with. That's the traditional mindset I had. But I would love to travel. I love to see the world. I'm from Chicago, live in Los Angeles, came out here for college and just never left. So for me, the the dream of going to see and experience so much was there. And I was unhappy with the current job I had. So I started planning a trip, literally spent time planning a year, call it my gap years, saved up my money, and it was ready to go. The week before I was supposed to give my notice, I blew out my knee.
Playing
Second
sports?
time. Sadly, the first time it was playing sports. This time was working out. So same knee, just gave out on me. Boss comes in a couple days after I do this, and he's like, "Hey, what do you want to do? Are you happy here?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, you couldn't have asked for a better setup. I should have been able to go." And like, funny enough, here's my 2 weeks. I'm going to go travel the world, or South America at the time. And unfortunately, I'm like, no, I'm content. We're good. Can't let you know that I'm injured, and life goes on. But the unhappiness was still there. What ended up happening, and this is the lesson learned, is the impatience, right? So recovery would have been a year. Technically, I could have just gone and spent the year continuing doing what I was doing and push the trip back a year. Unfortunately, what I ended up doing was, well, if I'm unhappy, I'm impatient, this trip's not happening, let's go find another job that I don't know, will serve the happiness, will give me what I'm looking for. Who knows what it was? This was years ago, right? So I ended up leaving the company. So well-established Yahoo job I had for 5.5 years or so, stocks, the whole 9 yards. I went to another company thinking like, all right, what do I know? This got to be the right move. Well, 2.5 months later, we parted ways. And that was the gut check of going like, wow, I left an established job, a career for this, and this is where I'm at now. And all I had to do was, and if we actually look at the time of when we parted ways, that was the year later. I'm like, so all of this just to say I'm back where I could have been, and now I could go travel. Now, hindsight is, you have your first time being fired. You're like, wow, what do I do? So you have the panic. You don't know what to do. So is the panic. I've got to go find another job. Traditional family saying like, you've got to go do this. You've got to go get a new job. So I was fortunate enough and got a new job, and that where it set my career in a completely different trajectory. So the lesson here is really understanding what's the universe giving you. The universe is literally telling me, you wanted to go on a trip, you wanted to do this. Here's on a silver platter, go. Instead, I'm like, no, I'm panicking. I've got to go and get a new job. I had the money saved up. I was good. I could have done it. So the biggest thing is listen to what the universe is telling you. Stop fighting it in that regards. Like I was fighting because it's the shock of your system of in a sense being fired. You know, it's never a good feeling. I've fired people, unfortunately. That's never been a good feeling being on that side. But like at the end of the day, have clarity of what you're looking for. The universe is giving me what I was looking for, and I decided to fight it. And that literally has changed my entire life. I never went on that gap year, quote unquote. I've done travels, and so that continues to fuel my soul. But where I am, what is it, 10 years, 12, whatever that's been now later, it's a very different trajectory than had I taken that international experience.
Right. So many things to, first of all, thank you for sharing that story. And I think a lot of people can relate. So why do you think most people would do what you did, where you had the opportunity to be like, hey, peace out, going on this gap year, travel South America? Why do you think most people, because I don't think you're alone in what you did, I think it's actually quite common. Why do you think most people would choose not to do that, even when they have the opportunity to do so?
Because it was a shock to the system of like, from an ego standpoint, like, hold on, I left this company on my own to go to another company, leave on not on my own, thinking, whoa, what just happened here? And so then it's part ego. It's like, well, I've got to go back and get another job and figure out, was it me? Like, what happened? But it's also in moments of shock like that, it's hard to get the clarity especially when all those voices are chirping into your ear,
Mhm.
against what your better judgment would have wanted, right? Like
Mhm.
if you're telling people, hey, I'm going to quit my job and go travel, most people are probably going to tell you that's kind of ludicrous. Why
Yeah,
would you be doing that?
for
Um,
sure.
and that I think is the biggest thing. You have to start quieting the outside voices, and pay more attention to your gut and your clarity of mind. And I clearly did not have that at the time.
Mm. And so what do you think after you were fired from that job? Walk me through how you were able to rebound, let's just call it that, to your next opportunity. What was it kind of like the mental gymnastics you had to take yourself through?
So this goes to the setup of Greg Wasserman, my life motto of life is about time and relationships.
Mm,
So I already had that concept. I didn't have it solidified as a phrase, but the concept of who I am in my core, that's been there since I was a child. So to answer your question, it was ultimately, well, you're working your network.
mm,
And so the next job I ended up getting was truly because of my network, people in on LinkedIn who reached out to me, former coworkers who knew my name. So once again, it's not who knows you, but who knows what you know. And that's what my mentor loves to tell me. So it was one
I
of
like that.
those. Yeah, it's one of those where, all right, now this is opportunities coming in. I was skeptic. I mean, you could ask my former bosses. I'm like, really? And then I realized, like, no, this was a great. And then the next thing you know, I'm there for another 5.5 years type deal. So it was a complete different trajectory than what I was looking for from a go travel, but it set me off on the life is about time relationships. I
Mhm.
get most of my jobs through connections, through conversations, through who you know, and being open to those components. Um, and then starting to do a better job on what is your gut telling you.
Right. No, I love that, especially the piece about it's not who you know, it's who knows what you know. Really like that. Do
Shout
you
out
feel
to
like
Rob Duran on that one.
yes, shout out to Rob. Um, do you feel like you missed out on anything?
Oh, I mean, still would love to go travel South America. Been more fluent in Spanish
Yeah.
and seen more of the world. So yeah.
Right. The reason why I asked that, Greg, is sometimes there's a how would I phrase this? There's a belief system that would say you didn't miss out on anything. It happened the way that it's supposed to happen. You know, it's kind of like, when people go through traumatic experiences that caused a period of difficulty in their life, and it kind of turned them into this person. And you ask them, even though it was a horrible experience, a horrible time, a difficult time, you ask them 10 years removed, 15 years removed, if you had to do it all over again, would you? Most of them would say yes, because it kind of turned them into the great human being they are today. So that's where I was asking with that. And your experience kind of reminds me of mine. I had a similar kind of experience. I left a pretty established media company here in Toronto for a bigger opportunity, essentially, but it was with a startup. And so I know there was a bit of a risk there, but I wanted my chance to shine, a bigger opportunity, a chance to grow. So I was with this company for just shy of a year, and then um 2 weeks before the pandemic, they let me go. Didn't know the pandemic was happening. We just knew something was happening around the world. And then 2 weeks later, the world shuts down. And I'm like, man, well, maybe those voices that told me that I shouldn't have left were right. And I just remember it was a very difficult thing for me because, like you, we have a similar background, ad sales, and my numbers were all in line. In fact, I remember Q1, I was already 60% on my target for the entire year. So I was doing pretty well from a numbers perspective. So I couldn't quite figure it out. And I remember that day it happened. I went to the YMCA because I happened to live right next to one. Did some laps in the pool, sat in the sauna. I'm like, okay, what would I do differently? what would I stop doing and what would I start doing? I ended up writing this piece, shared it on LinkedIn about what I learned from that experience. And I think that moment has helped me progress to where I am today. Even though it wasn't a pleasant experience, it wasn't totally bad. It just disrupted the way that I wanted things to happen. But I still ended up where I wanted to be, but took a detour, but still got there with some more experience, so to speak. So I can definitely relate to what happened to you there. Now, given your experience selling podcast ads, formerly at CBS Radio. By the way, I did apply to them when I lived in New York. CBS Digital didn't get in. They didn't call me back. But good on you. So yeah, given your experience selling podcast ads, this is way before podcast was a thing. Selling podcast ads, formerly at CBS Radio, and then moving on to running 3 podcast listening platforms. What would you say are some of the biggest or most common mistakes both podcasters and podcast platforms are making today?
Not having a strategy. I mean, I talk to people all the time still about this, and it boggles my mind. The vision of being still in the industry, and you and I will get it, so those may be listening as well, but the monetization of podcasting is still very much tied to sponsorships and ads and the stuff that you and I have sold, right? But there's so much more to podcasting than that. And so if the strategy isn't even created, but the mindset going in is, we'll grow, don't know how, but we'll grow, and then we'll go get a sponsor, or I have a very niche audience. Therefore, I can go get a sponsor who's going to go, I've got this niche audience of 100 CMOs, and it's very targeted, and these are the decision makers, but small audience, so I should go get a sponsor to do this. Like, it's still a broken model and still a broken strategy. And so the real piece is sitting down and understanding, why are you doing this? Who are you hoping to talk to? I think I asked you the question, like, when I'm like, why are you doing this type deal? Like, where do you want your show, knowing what your background is? Where does this propel you, and so forth? But like most people that hit play, and that I will stop and say, like, I am all for the don't overanalyze the tech, the tools, the mic, like you've got a mic and I'm on headphones, so the quality is going to be a little different. Just hit play. That's okay. Have a strategy before you hit play. Don't overanalyze the strategy, but at least come up with, why am I doing this? And set yourself up for success, because a lot of people don't understand all that goes into, as you and I were talking about in the green room here, like those that don't have a podcast, like there's a lot of work. It's not just scheduling a person, coordinating that, think of the questions like Corey sent over, and the follow-up, all these different components that go into it. That's just one component. But now we've got to talk about, what is the strategy? Why am I doing this? Is this building my brand? Am I hoping to just get sponsorships? And if the answer is I just want sponsorships, that alone is a broken model. So how do you make money? The reason there's so many podcasts that stop between 3 and 10 episodes is most people just go like, I like talking to people. Hey, my motto is life is about time relationships. I love talking to people. So I could clearly just start recording all these conversations I have, but what is the purpose of those conversations if I were to record and then put them out there in the world? Most people don't have that as a basis. They're not thinking about what I like to say, what is your business? If you treat yourself as a business and a brand, you will have better success because you have a strategy and you understand what that is, as opposed to I'm hitting play and having conversations, or wherever it is you think this is going to take you. And then you end up fading out. You don't see the results. You get discouraged. Why is this not growing? So you're thinking about the wrong metrics, and all those components just go into start with a strategy.
You mentioned a key word there, metrics. What metrics should individual independent podcasters be focusing on, let's say in the beginning stage?
From my standpoint, I always say stay away from the downloads and build your audience across the core platforms that you feel comfortable with, and then even those that get you out of discomfort. So, think about your show and where you put your content, besides just on the listening platforms, you make shorts, so TikToks and Instagram. So for you, you're building your audience and your growth on those channels. If the core is to get back to how do I get people to listen to my podcast, that is not the core that is going to set you up most of the time for failure, because I may never listen to Corey's show. But if Corey's got a newsletter, or in this case, as we talked, you've got an Instagram, I can get your content in my feed. You are still getting my attention. You are still building that know, like, and trust, because Corey's information, whether it's a 30-minute or 30-second short or a LinkedIn post, is still hitting my eyeballs, and therefore the engagement. And so when you start looking at podcasting beyond just the downloads, which, you know, what you sell from a sponsorship standpoint is like, I care about that, but that's a problem. When I was selling CBS ads, I'm not going to name names, but we had a very well-known talent with a very high Instagram account count. So you would think, or this was the thought back then, and it still is the thought to some ear, that those users on their Instagram account would be able to translate into listeners on their new podcast. Never happened. I was never able to sell this person's show because she would be upset. Why? I'm this big personality. It's like, yeah, but no one cares about 1,000 downloads on your show if all you're talking about is pop culture stuff, for example, right? So how do you translate your million Instagram followers into listeners? You may never do that, but how do you engage with them and at least let them know about the content you're putting out there and so forth? That's a completely different strategy to try and force people from an Instagram post into a 40-minute conversation. That may not happen. I'm there for the quick bits, your TikTok video, and that's the attention span you're getting, not the 40-minute conversation.
I love that. What about the platforms, though? Do you see any mistakes? The bigger platforms, any mistakes do you see that they're making right now?
You know, I always go with the three questions that podcasters love to ask. How do I get more distribution? How do I grow my audience? And how do I monetize? Well, if you take that first one, how do I get more distribution? Everyone is so focused on the big, I like to look at them at the big five. You know, you can go the big two, Apple, Spotify in that regards, but like anyone that's listening, know that 30% of listens come from other platforms. So while the norm is those two, and now we've seen Spotify overtake Apple, and Apple seems to be shrugging their shoulders, like, all right, whatever. And the business for Spotify is a business as opposed to Apple. That's not their core component. And that alone will change your business decisions. But there's so many other platforms out there. Hence why I sold and ran 3 other listening platforms. So I think there's so much more that can be done. But the biggest thing is just understanding you don't have to listen on Spotify. You don't have to listen on Apple. There's other tools out there if you want to go ahead and listen to, because those other platforms are creating a unique experience for your listening pleasure, as opposed to, well, I'm already on Apple, so I might as well use Apple, or I already listen to my music on Spotify, so I might as well listen to podcasts here, which is their business decision.
Right. So on that note, let's talk about monetization and partnerships specifically. So if you, Greg, were a new podcaster in today's market with a small following, let's say a couple thousand on Instagram, and let's say you average about 500 downloads a month. Let's just say that's what it is. How would you go about monetization and getting partnerships if that's where your metrics were currently?
I mean, I would be telling you, and literally just taught a class on this a couple weeks ago, so date this, but still, I'm a firm believer, regardless of the size of your show, you can make money. And it may not be from sponsorships, but you can go ahead and start using affiliate links and start making money. Biggest problem that I see is podcasters are struggling on how to make money. Well, let's take anyone that's listening and watching potentially right now.
Mhm.
Corey's got a nice mic. Corey can go ahead and talk about the tools he used to produces this show. He can have on his website, hey, here are the resources I use to create my show. Here are the tools that I use, then recommend, because people are building their know, like, and trust with Corey. So if people are know, like, and trusting Corey, they're curious, what is Corey doing? What I love about your show here is, like, let's understand where the failures are. So people are starting to tune in and going like, well, I would be curious, what tools have you used, Corey, that you found failing? And what tools have you used that have helped you been successful? Like,
Okay, I like
that's
that.
the cool thing about podcasting is people want to know what you do, who you are. I hear it always is. It's fun for me and anyone listening here. It's I'll go on a little tangent here, but it's funny because I love talking to podcasts and go, how did you get into it? What made you do and create a podcast? You get that story, and then what ends up happening is once you started a podcast, friends start coming out to them and going like, how did you do this? I've always wanted to start a podcast. How do you do this? And that podcaster now has a business decision to make. Do they start helping people and telling them, hey, this is how I do it? Or do they turn that into a business? And you see a lot of the time, somehow I just started this, and next thing you know, I'm producing other people's shows because I've learned how to edit mine, so people want me to edit theirs, and literally there's their next career.
Right.
So if you go ahead and just start sharing people, here are the tools I use, here's what I recommend, here's what makes my life easier. Like, you have a beard, so how do you keep your beard trim? Like, you got to come on camera, you go to meetings and clients, like all that stuff in a sense becomes just B-roll about who Corey is and how Corey's show and life is optimized. And those are not you selling products per se, but it is you just letting people and informing other people of like, this is who I am, this is what I believe in, but this is also what makes me great. And you'll be shocked in like how some of those turn into sales. What's fun is you can use like an Amazon, the Amazon affiliate. And if someone goes ahead and adds your mic into their shopping cart, but then they add toilet paper, you're making a commission on whatever they put in their cart. And not just that. So like all these little things add up into just covering your cost. If you want to just look into covering your cost, that become incredible. If people come on your show and they talk about, hey, here are books that I recommend, or people are recommending their own books, great. We're going to put that in the show notes, is usually what most people do. We'll put that as a reference section on your website going like, these are the books that people have referenced and referred to on my show. And you've got it all tied back to an affiliate, and you're letting people know like, look, these are what people have recommended. I'll make a commission on it. But these are all little things that add up. And as your show grows, as you grow, you'll find ways that all those little monetizable moments turn into pennies, dollars, and a lot more from there.
Love that. I'll take you up on the beard. Thank you for the compliment on that. I never thought of that one specifically. Definitely taking notes on that part. Okay, so Greg, as we come close to the close, I guess that works. Throughout your amazing career, what do you believe is the best lesson you have learned thus far?
Sadly, I learned this one later in life and recently, but it has been a game changer in that regards. Asking for help.
Asking for help. Elaborate. Obviously, we know what that means, but give us some context here.
We live in a world where potentially you feel it's uncomfortable to ask for help. That is a sign of weakness, that I should know this, that whatever prophecy you've got in your mind or limited belief or whatever it is. But the actuality of it is asking for help is one of the biggest flex. That is a big self-esteem booster because you are having the self-awareness to go, I don't know the answer, and that is okay. And so back to what you and I were talking about, 60%, surround yourself in the right rooms and the right people. Like, ask the people. The other piece to that is, and this is another thing that you have to remember, what does it feel like when someone asks you for help? Do you go like, oh, I can't believe this person's asking me for help? No, you feel grateful that they're coming to you and like you find value in
Good
my
point.
answer.
Good point.
So whether I am an imposter going like, I can't believe this person's trusting me, they actually believe what you're saying for a reason. You've built that know, like, and trust. So you should be feeling grateful that they're coming to you for that help, because you do feel that joy of someone. So imagine now going to someone else and going, hey, Corey, you've been in the ad game for X amount of years. I need help with prospecting. How do you do it? And I have to imagine Corey's not going to go unless we're the old school radio guys going like, I can't help you and here's my books. But like most of the time he's going to go like, this is what works for me. Now, the biggest flex in that is I still have to go ahead and take Corey's advice and go do it. But the fact that I've now asked for it means, all right, I know that I'm missing something. And so I think that's also the joys of your show is here's 3 questions with strangers or friends of yours, whatever you may be bringing on your show, right? And then anyone that's listening is in a sense gaining information that they can go, that's me too. I feel that. And just imagine when you ask someone for help, their answer could be like, you know what? I actually don't know that as well. And it's like, okay, I'm not crazy. Then I'm not the only one that doesn't know this answer. Let me go find this, as opposed to thinking you should know the answer. And so in the last few years, once I started realizing I needed help on certain things and start raising my hand for it, the guidance I got, the support I got, and therefore the confidence and the knowledge I was able to get, I mean, that's been a trajectory change in my career and life as well.
I love that, because I think I recently heard, I'm probably going to mess this up, but a lot of people, the best way to get a favor is to ask for help. Meaning you ask somebody a question, it's kind of a cheeky way to kind of get a favor. But to your point, a lot of people have, too much pride, or they're a little bit insecure about how it may make them look or seem. But really, people are more open to at least pointing them in the direction at the very least. And I have to say for myself, that's something that I've gotten better at over the years. It's actually something that I'm known for now. I'm never shy to ask a question. And a lot of people come up to me and be like, yeah, I was actually thinking that. Yeah, because I used to be that guy, not raising his hand, trying to just figure it out myself. Now, here's the fun part, Greg. This is where the actual 3 questions come in, actually, if you're wondering, right? So I got some rapid fire questions for you. This is where you give me the quickest answer, the first thought that comes to your mind, as fast as you can. So here's question number 1. Question number 1 here. Where do you see the podcast industry 5 years from now? So let's say 2030. Do you see it being dead, thriving, or stagnant?
Thriving.
Awesome. And why do you say thriving?
Because I still am a big firm believer, and hopefully anyone listening and yourself on this whole conversation is like, podcasting, when you treat it like a business, is the biggest flex. Whether you're looking at it from an entertainment, so let's look at scripted shows that are being turned into IP. Like, there's a cost, but there's cheaper to do that than it is for a full-blown movie. But I think there's so much good content that's being done. But if we're talking about a show like yours, where it's a guest and you as the host, like, that becomes the biggest flex. Brand building, trust, so forth. Like, I mean, Facebook's been around 20 years. So social media, whatever that looks like, is not going away with AI. So I believe that we will still have the desire for these conversations. I talk to people daily and going like, I talk to people 60 times a month about death. I would love to document those conversations. So as we have 8 billion people on the earth, even if you can't get anyone to listen and all 8 billion are going to have a show, but like, there's so much great content and stories and storytelling that's going to come out from podcasting that, yes, you'll have the top rise up and be the $250 million shows, but you'll still have great people doing great things. And they're okay with only 500 listeners because it's building their brand, their know, like, and trust, and they're making a lot more money that way. But like, as an industry, I think there's money that's going into it. which we've seen with the acquisition of Oxford Road and Veritone merging in that regard. So $100 million right there. I would see, if not by the end of the year, definitely early next year, you'll see some more acquisitions that I think would probably end up happening. So there's money to be said. Will we see the growth of an audience? There's so many more people around the world that aren't listening to a podcast. And now that it's video first as well as audio. But if we go to my whole mindset of like record from that show and then turn that into all the different pieces of content that you need, whether it's a blog, newsletter, or whatever, yeah, there's no reason not to see the industry continue to grow.
Love it. Question number 2. What is one thing you used to be afraid of that you're now comfortable with?
Clowns.
That's a popular one. I'm one of them. Not that I'm a clown, by the way. I mean, in the sense that I hated clowns as a kid. Like, I hate them. I still low-key don't like them. I think they're kind of creepy looking, but I hear you on that one for sure.
Look, the one that did it for me, and I'll age on this one, was Pee-wee's Big Adventure and the clown scene in that movie. Seeing that as a little kid and going like, that was a trippy, freaky, probably not meant for kids kind of piece, but it was Danny Elfman movie, so enough said.
Yeah, for sure. For me, it was I think it was like my 7th birthday, and someone decided to, I guess, you bring a clown to a kid's birthday. That's someone thought that was a good idea. I was not feeling it. I was like, I don't know whose idea that was, but it was yeah. My last one for you, and it's probably one of my favorite ones to ask. What is a book that changed your life, or a quote / mantra that you currently live by?
Well, mantra, I mean, life is about time and relationships. So I'll take credit on that one in the iterations that it's probably come from. In terms of book that changed my life, I'm a big Brene Brown fan. So I would say the self-discovery, self-growth path that I started on in 2020 was Brene Brown. I was gifted Brene's book, The Gifts of Imperfection. And that was an incredibly eye-opening one. So I was not probably ready for it at the time. Like, anyone listening, I love this movie. So White Man Can't Jump, I always quote this because and there's a scene in there and they're like, you can't hear Jimmy. And it's like, no, I can hear Jimmy. And so it was one of those where it's like, I read Brene, I understood it. And then it was like 3 years later, I'm like, nope, I didn't understand it. And now I think I finally got it.
Yeah, you got it.
So yeah, that was a good one.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for that, Greg. So Greg, for the people that have listened to you here, if they want to connect with you, hire you for your consultancy services, collaborate with you in some way, shape, or form, what's the best way for that person to do so?
I live on LinkedIn, so that's the best place. Greg Wasserman. You can't miss it because the header literally says life is about time and relationships. So that would be me. Working on a website right now, so hopefully have that in the coming months. But yeah, LinkedIn, send me a message. Say, hey, I heard you on Corey's. Like what you had to say. Let's connect. Because you never know where that conversation is going to lead. And then I can go back to Corey and go, hey, Corey, someone actually listened to the show and they liked what I had to say. And Corey will enjoy that tidbit as well.
100%. And I have to say, I got some key takeaways from our beautiful conversation today. One, it's not who you know, it's who you know that knows what you know. I love that. I love the fact about we can look at products that we use organically as ways as creating affiliate links. Like, shout out to my beard. I could use the beard oil and all that type of stuff. So I appreciate the thoughts that you shared here. I think they're both relevant for those that are looking to get into the podcasting game, those that are already in the podcasting game. And so I think there was nuggets here for everybody. So with that being said, to all my guests, or I should say all my listeners, to all my listeners, you guys know I typically like to end each episode with saying this. Sometimes you don't have to learn anything new. You just need to hear that somebody else went through it too. And Greg shared an experience that most of us can relate to, losing out on an opportunity and having to kind of redirect ourselves. So with that being said, Greg and myself are out. Peace and love. Until the next time.
Clockwise, 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 clockwise.